Good morning. My name is Tim Rose, and I was tasked this morning. I'm well, thank you. I was tasked with telling my faith journey this morning. And that's always a bit of an awkward and wonderful thing to be tested in that process and to find out if you tell the story consistently over time. Come on in. Because as I know never happens in your life, in my life, sometimes the fish gets bigger the longer it's been in the water.
The good news is we have no way of testing it.
Well, that's true, except now it's being recorded, and so you might have that opportunity later on. I am the second of four boys, born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1960 to a cab driver and his wife, and was 18 months, just long enough to get cheese in my blood in Wisconsin, and then we moved to Illinois.
Once a cheesehead, always.
Always, I guess. Grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, and then St. Charles, Illinois, so I'm a Western suburban boy. Graduated from the now famous Mold School in St. Charles. I was in the first graduating class of that. From there, I went directly to Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Clown College, where I then graduated from there. And
Where was that?
Venice, Florida, just outside of Sarasota, right next to Sarasota.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was in the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey circus.
Really?
And
What led you to do that?
when I was a very young boy, because my family was a macaroni family, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had a lot of pasta, a lot of waffles toward the end of the month. Come on in. And somebody gave us tickets to Ringling Circus. And I must have been very young, maybe 8 years old. And when one of my brothers I have three brothers. So when one of my brothers had to go to the bathroom, all of us had to go to the bathroom, particularly in the Chicago Stadium.
Yeah.
And so when we went, apparently I wandered off and wandered into or toward Clown Alley. And there I remember I was, there was a clown there who just took a moment just to clown with me. And later I learned that was Lou Jacobs, one of the most famous clowns of all time. He was one of the first people to ever have his face on a United States postage stamp, a living person to have his face on the United States postage stamp. So from that moment onward, I always wanted to be a Ringling clown. And that was my goal. The only reason that I graduated high school was you had to graduate high school to go to clown college. And I was a solid D student in high school. And didn't know how to read until I was in the sixth grade, which, as you can imagine, made my participation in academics somewhat strained. So I was Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus Clown. And that was my dream. That was everything I wanted to be. And it turned out to be everything I wanted it to be and a lot less. And then I was a wanderer. Because I had, at the age of 19, reached my peak. I had done everything. So you can come on over here and sit, or you're welcome to. I then I drove a truck. I worked. I did a lot of sales. Did some modeling. Did some minor acting, and had a lot of fun doing that. But never was really in a place of grace. And my parents' marriage dissolved, disintegrated, as did our home. They filed for bankruptcy, and my brothers and I were cast to the wind. My father moved to Florida, and my mother moved down the block into a friend's house. And it was a really tough time in our life, as you can well imagine. And my brothers and I just dispersed. So I was kind of floundering and trying to find my way. And as happens, an angel came into my life. I didn't know that at the time.
How old were you at this point?
2021.
Wow, good. A lot by 21.
And, well, I had seen much of the world by the age of 21. A lot of it bad. and remember, this was many of you will remember this was the very early 1980s. It was a very free time. Let's just say that I was taking a lot of life and not giving much back. So I met this angel, who was a friend of my brother's girlfriend, and she was truly wonderful. And I wanted to spend more time with her. And her father was a pastor at the Congregational United Church of Christ in St. Charles, Illinois. And in order to get closer to her, I went to church. And that was an awkward experience because my reputation was well established in my town. There were a lot of people that may not have been entirely comfortable having me present. And this church welcomed me and gave me unconditional love. Not at first, but never grudgingly. And they welcomed me to sing in the choir. And they caused me other opportunities. And so this church welcomed me. And this young lady's father was the pastor, and he was not entirely comfortable, nor was his wife, with me dating their daughter. Something I realized much later was that they trusted their daughter with me. They didn't trust me with their daughter. They trusted their daughter with me. And those of you who are parents sometimes know you just have to roll the dice and let your kid run. We then came more fully into that church with my clowning abilities. The pastor invited me to do children's sermons with him. So I would interrupt the church service. And then he and I would just goof around, and we would plan this literally on Saturday evening. And he would say, well, I'm gonna do this, and I'd say, okay, well, I'll do this, and then we didn't need anything more than that. We had enough understanding of one another that we could just play that. But the truth is that I received unconditional love from that church and from that family, that eventually that pastor and his spouse accepted me and welcomed me into their family. And I'm still surprised by that. And as a father of daughters, I'm more deeply surprised. But I did not grow up in a family of unconditional love. Love in our household, because of how my parents were raised, was conditional. Not explicitly so, and I think they would probably try and reject that designation. But we experienced it as conditional. And you understand. So a place of unconditional love is a place of great welcome for me. And later in my ministry, I decided that that place of unconditional love was something that I wanted to share with the rest of the world. That was the most important gift that I could share, because for so many, the love itself is conditional. Good morning. Good morning. So that church welcomed me, and I kept feeling the presence of love and the presence of God, though we don't normally label it quite so, right? I don't know about you, but I'm uncomfortable even today with fully acknowledging the presence of God in my life, where God is pushing, shoving, deciding, cajoling. And I thought that I was crazy when I first thought, maybe I should be a pastor. I really thought I was crazy. And I probably was. But my father-in-law, because he became that eventually, Bill Nagy was his name. I went to him and I said, how do I know if I'm going to be a pastor? And he later confessed to me that he just thought that I was doing that so that I could get in his good graces, so I could be even further in the good graces of his daughter. And he eventually thought that I was serious enough that he sent me to a bunch of other pastors with just one job. Ask them if they thought they were crazy. And probably 5 of them I went to, and they all said, yeah, there was no question in my mind. I thought I was crazy. And Bill Nagy, had the same kind of sense. He wanted to be a dentist, and he went to college to be a dentist. And eventually, the Holy Spirit pushed on him hard enough that he thought, maybe I should go and be a pastor. So I went from this person to that person to that pastor, and realized that we're all a little bit crazy in our sense of call, and that it's an awkward place to be. I write about this in my church profile, my resume, and it's funny how many places ask me about this as I go around. He wasn't my father-in-law yet, but the parsonage of his house, they were very gracious to me, and I had, some of you may have had these cars that you hope they started every time. And and we would work on our cars, we'd hope they got us to work all week, right? And then we would work on them on Friday so that we could go out on Saturday so that we could maybe drive the next week. And I was underneath one of my, actually an orange VW Squareback. For those of you who,
Wow.
yeah, not the finest of automobiles. But it got me from here to there, and it couldn't get much cheaper. And I was laying underneath there. And I was talking with God, and I know that seems strange to some, but I was trying to negotiate. I was pretty sure that I needed to go into the ministry, but I knew that I did not have the gifts, the skills. You remember how I did in high school? I was a solid student. In our tradition, and it was the only one that I knew, you had to go to college and then graduate school, and not just any graduate school. This is tough graduate school. This isn't, lollipop stuff. And I should back up. I'll get you back there in a minute. I'll put you back under the Volkswagen in a minute. I was baptized Reformation Sunday, 1961. The 1961. The Reverend Dr. Robert D. Shum presiding. That's important. At River Forest Methodist Church. They weren't united, and now they're disunited again. And then we went to Baker United Methodist Church in St. Charles. So like this church, a cathedral church, right? Just big, wonderful music, all of those kinds of things. And came time for confirmation. The girls were more interesting than the lessons. And some of them were more interested in me than the lessons. And so we distracted ourselves from the lessons. And the pastor who was teaching confirmation at the time suggested that maybe I was not mature enough for confirmation. At which point I pointed out to him that he had a mail order degree, which did not go over very well. You remember mail order degrees? So I was a bit arrogant and pushy. So I was removed. I was thrown out of confirmation, literally. Parents are uncomfortable when I teach confirmation and tell that story. That'll be important in a minute. At that point, my family separated from Baker United Methodist Church, from any church. And that was a big loss to our family. We had been deeply involved. My father was Sunday school superintendent. My brothers and I have great memories of playing in big churches. We don't know how big they were. They may have been small, but they were big to us. And had a really good young church life. We knew the pastors well. There were always those bumps. My mother was a liturgical dancer in church. Seeing your mother flit about church in a leotard is just awkward. but it was a place of grace. And we lost that when we left that church. So that was tough. Come on in, Tom. Can we make, there's a chair over here.
Over here.
Yeah.
It's a person.
One of the things that, that fell apart for us. You remember I said that my parents had divorced and scattered to the wind. I think now, if we were active in the church, if we had stayed in the church, we would have had a support group around us that may have peered us at that time. So that the whole situation would not have collapsed. There's your advertisement for church. So I'm laying under a Volkswagen in my yet-to-be father-in-law's garage, tinkering away at it, negotiating, I think, with God. And be careful when you negotiate with God, because God's got a lot more pull than I do. And I said to God, I'll do this, but you have to help. Remember, I've got to go to, I'm broke, right? I'm living on a thin. I had to go to college. I had to go to graduate school. I was emancipated at the age of 18, so I had no parental money or anything like that. No legacy. And God said, okay, I'll help. And that's been a blessing and a curse ever since, right? Because once you start, you got to keep going. And as I'm laying under the Volkswagen, Cheryl comes out and sits there. Now she's a PK. Cheryl is my now spouse. She's the angel, right? That I was going after in church all the time. And I'm sitting there, I'm underneath the car, and we can't see one another, which is probably better. And I said to her, what would you think if I went into ministry? She tells this story. Inside she went, no, because the last thing, if you're a PK, that you want to be is a pastor.
What's a PK?
Be pastor's kid, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
pastor's
Oh.
kid. But then she said, no, that can't be, because I already love you. Which, when she eventually told me that story, was very sweet. So eventually I got out from underneath that car. I applied to Elmhurst, now university, then college. My father-in-law went to Elmhurst College. It's good UCC school, right? All of those kinds of traditional things. It was actually founded as a pro seminar to educate pre-seminary students, young men in those days, who went on to Eden Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri, in the ENR tradition, if you go back that far, E tradition, if you go back further. And was oddly accepted. I thought that I had no chance of being accepted. I had to take some remedial courses, as you might imagine, which I took at Elgin Community College. They were so excited to have a pre-theological student because they had all this money stacked up, because there had been no pre-theological students for a long time. So they have designated gifts for pre-the students, and they hadn't had them, so they started throwing money at me, which was nice. But I remember I went to financial aid. You had to visit, actually go to financial aid at the time, and I had the application there. And Gary Rold, it tells you how informative this experience was for me. Gary Rold was his name, and he was the officer. He looked at my tax return and he said, so you made $11,000 last year. So you have $11,000 to put toward your income, toward your education. And I leaned across his desk and I said, what? What do you think I lived on last year? You know, I had rent to pay, phone, not phone like we have now, but on the wall, and I had a car that I could barely maintain, and all those kinds of things. He finally got it when he understood that I had been emancipated. So they gave me money. And the first place that I went when I got on campus, they gave me a dorm room on campus. The poor guy that, I mean, I had as you said, seeing the world. And I was 23 by that time, and yeah, 23. And all these college kids who were 18, maybe 19, just come, that I was a marvel to them, and they were a little daunted by my presence. And so the very first place I went when I got on campus was the Learning Center, where they gave you the remedial skills to learn, right? So this is how you take notes. This is how, because again, I was a very poor student. And went through college, did it in 3 years. Got married my last year in college to Cheryl, who I'm still married to some 39 years later, 38 years later. And finished college in 3 years with a degree in philosophy, with a minor in social work. What are you gonna do with that? You're gonna go to graduate school. What else can you do? As a sidelight, this is something that we philosophy students, I think there were 3 of us, were recruited by Microsoft at the time. They actually came to us and said, will you come work for Microsoft? Because we knew how to think, right? We were trained in logic and complex thought and those kinds of things, which a lot of, no offense, science students, right? You know the science, but you don't know how to think as such. And so because they were developing software, and they wanted us, that's just a weird sidelight in this process. I went on to Eden Theological Seminary, did very well there, and was in the student body, general troublemaker. Oh, when I was in college, I led the South Africa divestment movement, which was an important part of the world at that time. Learned a powerful lesson. One of the people, actually the chair of the board of trustees, worked for a company that had deep pockets in South Africa. Guess who won that divest South Africa movement? It wasn't us. But we did get a South African student scholarship where they would bring a student from, I don't think it was just South Africa. I think it was anywhere in Africa over to. So I was learning those kinds of skills. Graduated, and took a small church, was called to a small church, I say that wrong, to a good church in a small town, 2,000 people, Beecher, Illinois, where you may not know how to get there, but if you keep going, if you get on Halsted Street and it turns into Route 1, and you just keep going south, and you go south, and you're through the city, and you keep going south, a little further south a little more, and then you get a ticket, you're in Beecher. It was a community that was transferring from being a farm community, literally, to a bedroom community. And we had one guy who would come in, Ron Albers, he died not too long ago, and he had a check, and it was his first 10% of his crops. And he would bring an elevator check from the local grain elevator to the church. That was his tie. It was that kind of a community, but we had a great time there, had our 2 daughters, wonderful place to start our family. Cheryl, by the way, put me through seminary. She worked as a physical therapist assistant for that time. And then we had our 2 girls, Anna and Rachel, and then was called to be the pastor of a new church start in Naperville, Illinois. And that's the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It is difficult work to start a new church. And loved it and hated it, it's the way that things work. The challenge for us is that we were in DuPage County. DuPage County gives more money to the Republican Party, or at least at that time, than did Orange County, California. And so we were a very progressive church, open and affirming, had lots of gays and lesbians, lots of gays and lesbian, like gay and lesbian families. We were interracial, all those things you wanted to be, but we were sushi eaters in a beef market. So we were really challenged. The church is still doing well, still thriving and having fun. They continue, and I'm glad for that. I was called then to head LifeLink Bensenville Home Society. And if you have much connection to the United Church, you would know Bensenville Home Society. It was founded as an orphanage and old people's home back in the late 19th century when the flu epidemics went through the community. And the flu epidemics did a really cool thing. They wiped out everybody who wasn't old or really young. They took out the middle. So thus you needed orphanages and old people's homes. Founded by German evangelicals, founded by a Christian organization. And we did everything from domestic adoption, international adoption, early Head Start, intact families. So we helped families that were struggling. We did affordable housing for disabled adults and seniors, and we ran nursing homes when I first got to be a part of that. So I traveled internationally, was on the road 16 days out of the month. But it was a great thriving ministry. I had a lot of fun. It was a wonderful place to be.
You weren't in that Volkswagen anymore.
Wasn't in that Volkswagen anymore and didn't have to pray that my car started every day either, which was a good thing.
We're thankful.
Yes, very thankful. And Flurry, I'm often that thankful. I remember that I used to have to start my car that way. And now when I started, I actually, not every day, but there are times I'm like, yeah, all right. Then that ended, then I became an interim pastor. I farted around trying to be a professional speaker. I didn't have the discipline for that. So started as an interim pastor, and this is my 5th interim. So that's kind of the arc of my bumpy journey. Doing now, love what I'm doing now. Love you guys. You're a wonderful church. I will miss you.
We will miss you.
Jeffrey, I kept thinking was overselling you. He wanted me to come here. Jeffrey Phillips and I have been friends for a very long time. My first church was his first church. I succeeded him. I was a little concerned when I went to that church. I'll tell you why in a second. When he was in Zimbabwe as a missionary, I was the pastor of the church that he left from, which is what made me nervous. Why did this pastor leave this church and go all the way to Zimbabwe? But it was a wonderful church. That was the church in Beecher, which you can imagine was a big step to have Jeffrey as their pastor. He was a relatively out gay man at the time. And that we have chairs over here. You come late, you got to sit next to the principal. I'm sorry. So yeah, Jeffrey and I have known one another for a very, very long time, and I thought he was overselling you. You know, he wanted me to come here, but he was. You are a wonderful congregation, and you are to be commended for your history and your strength.
Got here just in time for that.
So So now Q&A.
So when you left being a pastor of a church to go into the orphanage and senior, how long had you been at that church?
8 years. The thing that made that jump possible for me is that when I was in Beecher, a little town, one of LifeLink Bensenville Home Society's communities, senior communities, was in that town. And they asked me to be on their ethics committee, and then on their particular board, and then on the board of the corporation, and then I chaired the board of the corporation. And so as I moved through those different steps, I learned the whole organization and then was able to just step into that role.
Jump right in.
Yeah, the real challenge at that place was that we were losing between $2 and $3 million a year, which is somewhat of an unsustainable model. We had we were north of 100 million in revenue, north of 400 employees. But when I went in, we had to restructure the organization. And that was very difficult. What it was that the state of Illinois used to be a very good payer in terms of Medicare and Medicaid. And in order to make their budget, in order to make their budgets work, they just kept pulling that money. And if you have somebody that you need to get on Medicaid in this state now, it's very tough. Because they just kept reducing the money, and you can't operate a home. You cannot provide quality care for seniors or anybody who needs Medicare, Medicaid, disabled adults on what the state of Illinois pays.
So it doesn't exist anymore.
What? Pennsylvania Home Society, it exists in a different way. We turned all of our foster care over to other agencies back through the state. And that was very tough, but almost all of those employees got jobs, the ones who didn't, I'm pretty sure shouldn't. You know, there are always employees that need to be returned to the market and work someplace else. We kept the senior care facilities and the disabled care facilities, the housing facilities, and those went very well. International adoption has changed substantially in the last 15 years. China has closed as an adoption site. Russia has become more volatile. Korea, the same. South Korea has gotten such a great capacity in economics that they don't do adoptions anymore, or they limit them. So the whole thing was changing, and I think that every organization about every 100 years has to really flush and start over again, like the Cubs, like the Sox. And that's what we had to do. We had to redesign ourselves to become effective. Yeah.
So did that experience, lead you into liking interim ministries as opposed to staying at one position? Because you're kind of going
Well,
through and changing the organization?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It taught me that I loved to do that kind of work. But there's a second piece to that, and I'll tell you that in a moment. The reason I love interims is just for that. I get to go in, figure out where you need to clean some stuff up, how you need to heal from what was or celebrate what was and things like that. But the real exciting part for me is to take folks and get you to vision what's next, and then to start to build that vision and then turn it over to somebody else, right? I get to help you decide if you're gonna be a long haul trucker or a short haul trucker. Because if you're a long haul trucker, you need a different kind of driver than a short haul trucker. It's kind of a gross metaphor, but I think you understand. And so that's what I truly love about interim ministries is to be able to do that. Then my kind bride, Cheryl, will remind me that I get bored easily. And so if I'm not changing relatively soon after I get here, I start to do stuff that, it's not healthy for you. That's an overstatement, but no, I like to move on. I like to get things and keep things moving. Yeah.
Can I
Thank you.
jump in and ask a question? I'm tickled that your Volkswagen Squareback was part of your faith journey, that you prayed that it would start. My Volkswagen Squareback was also part of my faith journey because I prayed that the brakes would work.
Yes, yes.
So
Yes.
I'm glad to find fellowship with somebody who found Volkswagen Squarebacks to be such an integral part of who they are faith-wise.
We are fellow sufferers.
That's a big faith, JS.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a big faith in a car to trust it. Trust a car
Oh,
with
yeah.
it.
Absolutely.
yes.
I was just gonna say, it's been really wonderful having you here.
Thanks.
This congregation has not sung Baba Black Sheep together.
That was
And
good.
it left with such fun, with such joyful, now we understand.
Yeah, I was clearly a black sheep in that, in the best and worst sense of that, yeah.
Right.
I'm thinking about Cheryl.
Yes,
She went from being a PK to a pastor's wife.
yes,
I mean, she got deeper and deeper.
yes. Yeah, and sometimes that was comfortable and sometimes it wasn't. We were fortunate to be in the town, in the church that we were. It was a big part of our social life. And friends, and there were a lot of young families in that church, so it really proved good for us. The other thing that small town church did was provided us with a babysitter. Auntie Glow, Gloria Lukey is, what was her name? We miss her every day. My kids love her to this day. But she was a pastor's wife whose husband died in that church. It actually in the parsonage. And so then she married another man in the community, but she just loved kids, And so it was never a problem. Auntie Glow, yes, and they were as comfortable at her house as they were at ours. The other thing that small town taught me, now mind you, I was a suburban boy, and most of you can probably relate to this. When we moved in, people said we knew you were there because we could see you watching TV in Beecher. Now, we would walk past each other's house and not even think about if they're watching TV or not, right? But in a small town, they know. They used to be upset. They used to be upset that I would park, apparently Jeffrey didn't, that I would park my car in the garage. I thought that's what the garage was for. But not out in front of the house so that they didn't know if I was home or not. But the thing, so that felt very
Yeah.
exposed. But those people knew, and this is a little crass, who peed their pants in kindergarten, and they still loved them. They wouldn't shun them. They dated each other and then married somebody else. They knew how to have community in that kind of gracious way. And that was a good learning for us, in that place. But for Cheryl, it has always been, yeah, and she liked that role. Oh, she loves to tell this story. Hannah had, I think it was Hannah, my mother had come to visit and had taken Hannah for a walk in her stroller. And as kids will do, Hannah kicked off her shoe. My mom didn't notice. So now the shoes, we're like, okay, well, one baby shoe gone. But the next morning on the front porch swing was some vegetables in Hannah's shoe. That's a small town, right? But Cheryl, I had gone to work, Cheryl got out, had taken a shower, came down she called me at the church and said, did you put some vegetables on the kitchen table? I said, no. She said, there's vegetables on the kitchen. It was the parsonage. It wasn't our house. It was their house. So they felt that they could just walk in and put vegetables on the kitchen table. So you kind of live in that fishbowl kind of place. Related to that, if you've met Cheryl, it's very few of you, and that is by her design. Because she's trying to teach churches now that it's not a twofer. Which it used to be, right? You get the pastor, you don't necessarily get the pastor's spouse.
Did she keep her career?
No, when we made the commitment to live on one small town pastor's income, when we went to Beecher, and then, later on, she became an aide to autistic, well, you actually met her, in an autistic classroom, so she spent a good number of years doing that. And that was a really great thing for her. She used her physical therapy skills to help very small children with disabilities and needs, to grow and get stronger.
I understand her ideal being a twofer, you get.
Yeah, so it used to be cultural difference. It used to be when you got the pastor, you got the pastor's spouse. So she taught Sunday school, or she led the choir, often led the choir, helped
Played
out
the
with
piano.
women's organization, played the piano. And hosted potlucks and had people over and all of those kinds of things. And no, that isn't the way people pastor now. So she's trying to manage that. She would also like to find a church where she wasn't married to the pastor. So she has her own pastor, because she's never had one. father, and me,
Wow.
yes.
What did your daughters end up doing?
So my daughters are wonderful, had a lovely evening with them last evening. Hannah is an actress. She's 33. She does murder mysteries, which, murder mystery theaters. So she's got T-shirts that say 50 murders and counting or something like that. And she really delights in doing that. So she's a working actress, but doesn't make enough to be in the unions and have her own insurance. So then she also works at the DuPage Children's Museum, coordinating field trips, helping coordinating birthday parties, answering phones, things like that. That's how she gets her insurance.
Thank you.
You know that once you hit 26, you gotta get insurance. And my Rachel, is just turned 30 this month, and 11 days ago. And she, is a special education teacher with special ed kids in Aurora, Illinois. In a needy school in Aurora. She was like her father was, lost in the wind after a time, and they needed aides in a classroom, so Cheryl and Rachel worked together closely, and then Rachel fell in love with being a sped. She liked being a sped aide. She wasn't sure she wanted to be a sped teacher, special education, sorry. And she does love being a teacher. She just doesn't like the paperwork, like most teachers.
That's the question.
How long were you with Wrigley?
I was 18 and 19 when I was with her.
What was your
So
question?
how many years?
One season.
One season. Because we took our son who's 53 when he was probably 6 or something.
What year?
Well, that would have been 75 or 6.
No, I was after that, 78, 79.
So maybe we saw you.
Maybe you saw me, right? People say, I think I saw you, and I always go, well, of course you did, you know, because
Why not?
30,000 people, I'm able to pick
You
you
were
up.
the third one out of the car.
No, I was last out of the car,
Oh.
because I was a troublemaker.
So listening to your community, suburban kind of behavior, I can relate very well because that's what we are in Africa, at least in Ghana. And I was kind of used to that because my parents, when they lived there, they expected to be up and out at a certain time in the day.
Mhm.
So somebody would walk around and say, good morning. So after a couple of hours, if they've not seen her, they would walk in to see why they are not up or, you know.
That's good.
Yes, and we were for each other. So talking about
Yeah.
you having a party there, I can understand,
Yeah.
you know. It's when I came here and trying to, I knew from being in London before coming here. However, when you got to somebody and the first thing you do is try to learn of them. So you question certain things to in order to get to know them. The next question will be, oh, are you the police or something?
Yep,
Yes.
yes,
You have neighbors, you try to be nice to them, and I had an elderly neighbor who had gone grocery shopping and it was in the snow, she had all these things, and I went to help her, oh, won't you want to help yourself?
Yep.
You know, so the mindset that I had was
it's
not-
very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yep, the undertaker would come to he lived just down the block. Oiki Oldenburg was his name, Oiki. And they had a million different, Pro, Ubby, Wibby, but they just, all these guys had different funny names. But Oiki would constantly be mad at Cheryl because he would call the house, where's Tim? And Cheryl would say, I don't know, because we didn't keep track of one another. This was before cell phones. And he was just put out that she didn't know every bit of my schedule. That's how they expected things to be.
No, oh, I was just gonna ask in general your thoughts about, you said for a while you were kind of in the wind and one of your daughters was, it's hard to witness that for parents, isn't it?
Yes,
Very hard.
yes, yes. And I have, between the ages, starting at 18, I had no parents.
Yeah, that's hard.
So I don't have co-experience in that way. I was not parenting in that time. So that was an interesting piece of that.
Mhm.
So I'm learning it as I go.
Tim, two questions. I don't know how many churches in the capacity of your assignments, how many churches have you served? And also, your organizational skills I think, were very much appreciated. And I noticed, you were not present last week. And how did you know that you needed to do that? Now, that was wonderful. And also, didn't I read that you were a clown?
Yes, I was a Ringling Brothers clown. That's how we started today. So yes, I was a
Okay.
Ringling Brothers clown.
Oh, was that the
This
fart
is-
joke? Is that what I did?
Yeah, part of, yeah.
Oh,
My administrative skills have always been pretty good. They got better when I was running a huge organization. They couldn't help but get better. And I had many mentors at that time. How I knew not to be here last week is because this is my 5th interim. And when the candidate comes, it's about the candidate, not about me. So I just make myself scarce.
I thought it was magnificent. I thought it really was important.
Thank you.
But I would have never thought that would happen. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's,
who
for
would think
many,
that?
that's part of the interim training. Or at least it was with my mentors, yeah.
Amazing.
How many churches have you been?
This is my 5th interim. I've been in 7 churches.
I have a question. Has your philosophy degree helped you along the way?
Yes, it helped me a lot so remember, I was a poor student and I really didn't know how to think. When I went to Elmer, that sounds a little weird, but you have to structure thinking, right? There are methods and ways of thinking. And Elmer's taught me how to think, for which I'm forever grateful. Rather than just exist, you think and you plan and you work through. So that was helpful. Yes, my philosophy degree made reading, when we started at seminary, we sat down in our first year. We had a working group that we established right away. And we figured out that our reading assignments were 300 pages a night. You have to be able to grab the vocabulary and the thought processes very quickly. And so we were able to do that. And then you never read 300 pages. Well, a couple of the nerds did, but there's no way you can do that. So you learn to scan, you learn how to prioritize, you learn how to do those kinds of things. Many of you have been in graduate school, you know what that. Chuck, you probably read every page and did every equation.
No, I read the first sentence every
First and last sentence of every paragraph, it's the fastest way to get.
decide whether you want to read the rest of it or.
That's right.
Well, whether you read the first sentence or the whole page of Kant, I was lost. I remember one weekend in the library, a little thin book,
Yeah.
like 60 pages. I had to write an essay. I was like, I really had no idea what I was reading
Yep.
or what I was writing. I was just in a different place.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't understand it.
All before the internet where you could look up somebody else who could tell you.
Oh, yeah, and I was struggling.
You don't know where that's from.
Yeah, that's the other problem.
I have a question. I told someone we had an interim pastor. And they said, what's that? And I said, well, he goes to churches and fills in when they've lost their pastor. And I said, well, he must not be very busy. I said, well, I don't know. I think he seems like he's pretty busy. And she goes, well, how does he know, like, when you get a new pastor, how does he find a new church? I couldn't answer that question.
So I only work one hour a week. And the problem is that it breaks up the whole weekend. So that's how I always respond to those kinds of questions. What is it you doing there all week? They're on twiddle my thumb. The way the process, first of all, interim pastors, particularly good ones, are in high demand.
I don't think so.
Because pastoral changes and you had a lot of candidates that you looked at as a congregation. The number of pastors is just dropping precipitously, and COVID just decimated us, because we had to reinvent like teachers, right? Teachers have bailed on schools like crazy because COVID. You had to start again and you didn't feel supported and it was really hard and all those kinds of things. The way that it works in this case is that Jeffrey called me and said, we need an interim pastor he was thinking about. The way that it also works is that in the United Church, in the Presbyterian Church USA, in the Methodist Church, because I'm UCC, I can work in a lot of different churches, because they're all similar. There's postings. And so I can look in those postings, but
So there's constant postings.
yes, and this sounds egotistical, but it's all mostly inbound for me. People call me and ask me.
And was that true in the beginning or since you developed relationships and been doing these?
I was called by a denominational official for my first one. He said, thank you. Since I was under that Volkswagen, it's never been that I had to look. There's always been who was it the other night that was talking about a thread? And it's always been Chris Kelly. But there's always been kind of a pulling thread for me, that when things seem awry, that thread pulls me. And that's the power, that's the work of the Holy Spirit. For me, the big challenge is being trusting.
Did you say to trust it?
Trusting
Oh, trusting.
that the Holy Spirit will keep pulling that thread. And I'm in that place right now. I don't know where I'm going next. I haven't got the first clue.
I guess that's what she was kind of asking,
Yeah.
like, how does he know what's gonna happen next? Like, I don't know how you do this, but yeah.
You trust the Holy Spirit.
So, yeah, what are your plans for the next 6 months with us? I mean, it's not, because you have
6
some
months,
observations
whoa.
to make.
Apollo comes the end of February.
Well, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Maybe not
So,
6, but yeah.
They're getting me out of here in the middle of February.
3 months.
What are my plans with you all for the next 3 months?
Yeah, because you said, well, you have some observations and you help us envision ourselves, even though
Well,
the vision plan.
Jeffrey, yeah, Jeffrey did, so this is a unique, this is a different, place. You all did your visioning stuff. When I came in, I had to figure out if you actually meant it or not. You kind of do,
Kind of.
but there are parts that you don't, but it isn't on a shelf collecting dust. It's alive. One of the things that Patty and I are doing is looking at, are you staffed for your vision? And what is that going to mean? We're looking at all right.
Well, you don't have to do it now. I just,
No.
it's an outline.
I think I can do it quickly. When the staff met with Paulo is the next pastor, if you're not on board. We met right over there. And I asked one of the staff members, how do you feel about this? And that staff member said, I feel like it's just another stepfather.
Another step.
Stepfather.
Oh.
And I thought that was a really keen observation. Don't be insulted by it. Let me unpack it for you. You had Joe Schenk since the Punic Wars, and then Jeff, and that was a tumultuous time. And by the way, if I'm telling stories out of school, then you're not paying attention.
That's right.
And then,
That's right.
and then Jeffrey, but you weren't sure you had Jeffrey for a while, and then you had Jeffrey.
Then we didn't.
And then we
And
did
then,
that.
then you did
Immediately we did that.
Not a turmoil.
March, right?
Yeah.
And then you got me. And you were when I got here, you were grieving Jeffrey.
Oh, yeah.
Deep, not everybody, but the corpus of the community was grieving Jeffrey. You understood why he left. You supported, some of you supported why he left, but you still grieved his going, right? You love him. He's been around here for decades, in and out. And so I had to start you by getting you to be through that process. Now, I could have convened meetings, we could have sat around and kumbaya, held each other's hands, cried, light a couple of candles and prayed and done stuff like that. But my main emphasis was to be ultra positive and to change things. And the ultra positive gives you hope for the future. The problem when you grieve loss. And you had lost this relationship with Jeffrey. But you also grieve opportunity. And you were grieving opportunity. He was set to be your next senior pastor. You were gonna keep him for 10 years or whatever it was gonna be. It couldn't have been 10. But you lost that. So my positivity is just like, okay, here we go. And I worked really hard with staff to keep that going. The other thing that I said I did was change things. And the reason that I changed things is, first of all, you say, well, that's the way we've always done it. And yeah, I can take that hit, but then when the next pastor comes, mind you, I didn't know who it was. Then I've already started changing things, so when she or he changes things, they're already being changed, so then you're not stuck in that spot. So for going forward, I'm gonna continue to do that. I'm gonna work with Patty and the rest of the crew to look at staff. How are we staffed? Where can we improve? How can we get things sorted out? You're still a little clogged up from COVID. Meaning that, like a lot of us, COVID, you started crossing a lot of lines in terms of responsibilities and things like that. And by the way, I know Patty's right there. I'm not saying anything that's been said. So uncrossing those things, recombing those roles so that we have separation of roles. So that everybody's doing a clean role rather than a merger, those kinds of things. The other thing is to keep you excited, and starting last Sunday, my number one thing to be is cheerleader of Paul. That's the interim role, right? He's very experienced. I've met him. He's a wonderful guy. He seems humble. I mean, I can give you the speech that I've already developed, but that's how we look at things. And anytime you tell me you're gonna miss me, I'm gonna say, I'm really excited Paul's coming.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Because it isn't about me. And it isn't about Paulo, it's about God.
Well, it's about us too.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Tim?
Yes.
You said something really cool. You said, well, in effect, you said you'd take the hit for the change. You were setting us up for, whatever we wanted to air and say, no, we don't do it that way. You were just letting us mouth ourselves out, weren't you?
Yeah.
And so that we are a little more, settled and waiting for some direction.
Yep.
Is that really it?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this is not by accident. If I'm doing it, if I'm making it up as I'm going, it should look like I'm making it up. Like when I preach, it should look like I'm making it up right there.
But I didn't know you were doing that until you announced.
Well, we're sneaky that way. Frankly, the thing that I left out is I think God is very, very sneaky and has a despicable sense of humor. Why else would I be sitting in this chair with you all from where I started? Right? It's the most curious thing. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
I have another responsibility at 10 o'clock. Thank you.